Hello all you wonderful people out there, my name is Huck Stewart, I'm a learning designer and an educator. Your time is valuable, as is mine, so let's not waste any more of it and dive right into today's video. Let me see if this scenario sounds familiar to you.
Looks like I was on mute. Sorry about that. Like I was saying, welcome to class today. Does anybody have any questions about the reading from last night?
Hello, darkness, my old friend.
Anyone?
So over the last few months, I have heard a lot of teachers and students complaining about this scenario. Whether they're in school or in meetings or even in church lessons, this idea of synchronous teaching through virtual means continues to create problems for learners. And although that was like a bit exaggerated, the scenario I showed you really does feel like a lot of people's learning right now.
Can anyone turn on their camera so I can see you?
Hello, darkness, my old friend.
Anyone?
In fact, there is another way, and that's what I'm here to tell you today. What I'm going to show you today is really ideas that people have discussed in years past. But what we're trying to do is think outside the box and shift our mentality of the way we view teaching. Now, these suggestions are going to feel different, but I promise you, if you implement some of these ideas, your teaching experience is going to improve significantly, and the impact you're going to have for your students and your student success is also going to improve. You'll get to a point where your lessons are going to be so efficient, and your synchronous Zoom sessions that you're going to have are going to be meaningful and engaging for students. And in my opinion, this really is the majority of the way we should be teaching for as long as we're forced to teach remotely, which I hope is not too much longer. So it is no secret that master teachers stand up in front of their class and are able to engage with their audience, their learners, in a very meaningful way. They can read the room and the reaction of their learners. They get feedback from them constantly and are always improving their teaching because of the feedback they're getting from their students. But the biggest complaint we get from teachers is that they just can't get that kind of feedback from their students. And so here's the big reveal. Are you ready? Stop trying to teach your students synchronously through live video. And that's not to say to abandon synchronous live video entirely. There is definitely a place for it, and we'll get to that later in the video. But what I mean is, stop trying to run a lesson the same way you did when you had students in front of you in a live classroom. But Huck, you may say dramatically, how am I supposed to teach my students? Well, that's a great question, dramatic me. And the solution to that issue is here. Well, not the phone necessarily, just the camera inside the phone. Look, I absolutely 100% agree with you. You are the expert. You need to get up in front of your students. You need to teach them what you know. You need to demonstrate for them what they need to learn, and you need to guide their learning. But to do that effectively, synchronously, remotely, with all the other factors and issues that could play into that, just causes so many problems. It does not guarantee that every learner has a path to success. So here's what you're going to do instead. Think about the lesson you're going to teach tomorrow or next week. What do you need to show your students? What information do they need to know? Gather up your lesson, all your material, all your equipment, everything you need to demonstrate or teach. Set your phone on a tripod somewhere, hit record, and teach your lesson to your camera. Drop your footage onto a computer, edit it, polish it if you want, or just upload it somewhere raw. I totally recommend uploading your videos to YouTube. You can make your videos unlisted so that only your students have access to the links. And the reason I say YouTube is because they do automatic closed captioning. But regardless of how you choose to send them the videos or share the videos with them, the main point here is that the students have your lessons in a video format before the day of class. Does this kind of sound familiar to you? Doesn't that kind of sound like the flipped classroom approach? That's exactly what we're doing here. Just flip your classroom. Send the content home for your students to consume on their own time. Now, I created another video on this channel that goes over different methods, tips, and tricks to create your own videos with just using a cell phone. Go ahead and check that out. It's got some excellent advice in there, if I do say so myself. Mostly it talks about ways you can set up your cell phone and do different type of demonstration videos, but it also talks about how you should keep your videos under 6 minutes if possible, or chunk them into 6-minute increments so that your students have a higher completion rate of your videos. But Huck, you may say again, do you mean to say that we should never interact with our students synchronously? No, that's not what I'm saying at all. Were you even listening? Look, the lessons you pre-create are just the first step of teaching. What you're doing is collecting all the information they need. Oftentimes, it may not even have to be a video that you create. Maybe it's a video that somebody else has created and you're just sharing with your students. It could be a chapter of a textbook. It could be a series of articles or blogs. No matter what you create for your students, the point of it is that they can consume this content on their own time and have the ability to go back and review it as many times as needed. This is more of a student-centered approach toward learning. And synchronous Zoom sessions are going to be just as big a part of it as ever. It's just a change in the way you choose to use your time with your students. So I have a little story of an experience that I had that really changed the way I thought about education. I was just starting my very final online course of my entire online program to become a learning designer. The teacher was Dr. David Merrill. I'll put a link to some of his work down below. Now, he sent all of us, his students, a series of content that we were supposed to consume. And his plan was to have us learn as much as we could independently, and then we were going to have a weekly live synchronous video chat session. This is well before most teachers were even thinking about teaching remotely. He told us to read what it is we were supposed to read and come to the live video chat session with questions. Now, when we arrived to that very first meeting, we all had an opportunity to introduce ourselves and get to know each other. And then we were expecting him to dive into some sort of lecture or maybe guide or facilitate some sort of discussion or ask us questions to follow up on what we had learned. Instead of doing that, however, what he chose to do was start out the lesson this way. He leaned in and said, "All right, ask me questions." So I was a decent graduate student, but I hadn't prepared any questions because I expected the teacher to sit down and just teach at me. I wasn't even prepared to be engaged in today's lesson. I had brought other homework assignments to work on. The rest of the class sat there in silence for a while, and then he repeated one more time, "Ask me questions. Does nobody have any questions?" So then he said, "All right, go ahead and move on to the next chapter. We will see you next week at the same time. Please feel free to bring me any questions then." And then he ended the meeting. Our first synchronous session lasted less than 4 minutes. Was he shirking his responsibilities as a teacher? Was he being mean? Absolutely not. What he told us, or at least what I got out of that, was that I was in charge of my learning. I had to come with questions if I had any at all, and I needed to take charge of the things I wanted. What he was doing is shifting the focus from him as the teacher to us as the learners. This is a very student-centered approach toward learning. And it was a very powerful way of teaching all of us that that is the point of teaching. Not to show the students what it is you know, but to help the students figure out what it is they need to know. Does this work all the time? Did every student come prepared with a question next week? Well, we were graduate students, so yes, all of us did. But would this work for a younger audience? Well, maybe not at first, but I would be willing to bet you that if you did this, several of your students would come prepared for the next session. And the questions they ask will likely benefit the ones who may not be paying as close attention. Either way, the student's time is well spent. Maybe the synchronous sessions will be shorter, but they'll be exactly what the students need. All right, so does this really work? I mean, there's gotta be pros and cons, right? So let's talk about the cons. Yes, with the cons, you have to be well prepared. You have to do a lot of what we call front-loaded work. All of your preparation for the course for that semester or that year is gonna have to take place early on. You gotta be on top of it. There's no more teaching on the fly anymore. You've gotta prepare your videos and find your content up front and send it to your students early so they have enough time to consume the content and come prepared for class. Also, a lot of your content's gonna have to be pre-packaged. Yes, you can make adjustments as you go through it, but if you do a lot of work creating your own video lectures or demonstration videos, it's gonna be difficult to change that at a moment's notice. That being said, I think it's only fair that we talk about the pros of this approach as well. The pros are that your students are gonna get more of an opportunity, more time with you as a teacher to ask you specific questions about things they don't understand. You will have more time giving students feedback and monitoring their practice, whether it's under your supervision or independently. You could also use your prepackaged material for multiple sections across even multiple years, assuming that your field doesn't change very often. And it also eliminates the possibility of technical difficulties that are so rampant in Zoom sessions and live synchronous video sessions. It eliminates those difficulties that often exclude some learners who don't have solid internet connections or who may not have a microphone or camera on their computer. And as I've said before, it also allows learners to be able to consume the content you've created on their own pace, at their own time, as often as they need. They basically get you as a teacher whenever they need it. Finally, this method really forces students to take charge of their own learning, to consider what it is they need to figure out, and then find a way to make that happen. And as we all know, when that happens, learning happens. I hope this video was helpful for you. Let me know what you think about this idea, and if you've tried this before, and tell me how it went. As always, I appreciate you watching. Feel free to subscribe to my channel like here somewhere, and also check out some other video of mine down here. I don't even know what's gonna be there. I guess we'll see. Thanks, bye.